Welcome to the latest episode of Five on the Floor on the Five Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app, on Apple Podcasts, on Android, Spotify, or the Five Reasons YouTube channel. Make sure you hit like, subscribe, turn the notifications on. Also, check out Off the Floor. Link is right here in the description. You can bypass the Apple upcharge, pay just $2.99 a month. You can cancel at any time, get access to 10 different channels. I mean, at 12:30 in the morning, this was the only place to be. Check it out. Again, you get the host updates from us before you see them anywhere else. And you get the stage shows, which we do not put on the podcast feed. So check it out. Again, it's Off the Floor, link right here in the description. Also, check out the great sponsors of the Five Reasons Sports Network. Includes our friends over at Water Cleanup. You can find them at WCUFL.com. That's WCUFL.com. Michael, Robert, and his team, they'll take care of you from beginning to end. If you have a leak in your place of business or your home, your one-stop water and mold cleanup shop, WCUFL.com. More than 100 five-star reviews on Google. They can handle everything from the preventative maintenance all the way up to the damage assessment. If they can't do the job, they will let you know. So again, it's Water Cleanup of Florida, WCUFL.com. If you've got the schmutz,
they got the guts.
And
Five on the floor, ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing, you can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frogs. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the floor playing, got it all banned. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat, we trust.
You sound scared.
It's about have the guts, we're here to bring the heat. Y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to Five on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the Five Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
all right, welcome back to Five on the Floor here on the Five Reasons YouTube channel. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick on the Five Reasons Sports. Got Greg Sylvander. You can follow him at Greg Sylvander. This is not an episode that we thought we would be doing. We've got huge trade news. Does not involve Jimmy Butler. I kind of feel like I posted that meme on Twitter where Will Smith from Fresh Prince walks into the house and everybody's gone. Mm-hmm. And I kind of feel like that's us talking about Jimmy now. We're not going to be able to get anybody's attention, right? Somebody tweeted that Jimmy needs to drive a cruise liner into the arena. I said it won't be Carnival. To get anybody's attention at this stage, like the Jimmy story, which ESPN is obsessed about since pretty much mid-December, I guess. They're not going to care about this now.
At least Luka it happened before the deadline.
Right. But now, of course, it's got Heat fans in their feelings, and we're going to talk about what happened last night. It's sort of in the wee hours of the morning. I was getting texts from a friend of mine from California. I was passed out, and they're like, "This is real." I'm like, I woke up this morning, like, "What's real?" And it did look like one of those fake accounts, like NBA Centel or something along those lines, because it was hard to believe that it actually happened. Let's get to the trade, and we'll get to some of the reasons for it. And also, I'm going to be debuting a show with Brian Fonseca, which is going to go on our new feed, our Five Reasons NBA feed. He and I are debuting. We don't have a name for the show yet, so we may just call it like the Nameless NBA Show, but we haven't come up with anything good. So for the time being, it's just me and Brian. We're going to do a show, and obviously we have a topic, but you and I are going to hit this today. So Luka Doncic has been traded. He's been traded to, of all teams, the Los Angeles Lakers. LeBron really hasn't had any Hall of Famers to play with over the course of his career, right? What is it now? Wade, Bosh, Allen, Kyrie, Love, Westbrook, Dwight, likely Hall of Famer, Shaq, although was not the best.
Those count less, but yeah, they're on the list.
Joel Anthony, Mario Chalmers. He's played with all these Hall of Famers. Now he gets Luka after AD. So let's get to the actual trade details. Luka goes to the Lakers. Coming the other way, I'll get to the exact details here. Coming the other way, we've got what? Okay, go ahead. Anthony Davis.
Yeah, so this is nuts. And just to preface all this, Ethan, you and I both were sleeping. I woke up around 4 a.m. and saw that I had missed the I guess craziness that was social media when this dropped. And for us to be doing an episode today about this and it not being necessarily related to the Heat, although we're going to weave our way there, it shows how big of a deal this is. So the Dallas Mavericks traded. This isn't like the Lakers acquired. Like, it's not the Lakers pursued. The Dallas Mavericks made the decision to trade Luka Doncic along with Maxi Kleber and Markieff Morris to the Lakers for Anthony Davis, Max Christie, and a 2023 first-round pick. It's a 3-team deal, so there were some other moving pieces that went to Utah because Danny Ainge Kane can't help himself and had to get 2 seconds out of this crazy blockbuster. I think he took Jalen Hood Schifino on, which was a young player. So it's like he got 2 picks to take on a young prospect. Anyway, the net is that, and we'll talk about kind of the ins and outs of all this. Not only is it just such a huge blockbuster trade, and it just seems like the Lakers always find their way. They trip and fall into another superstar over and over again. The fact that like the news basically has come out that no one knew that this was coming, including guys like LeBron, and that like maybe LeBron had caught wind, or Clutch had caught wind in the 48 hours prior, but that was about it. But it seemed like a lot of people made made it seem as if LeBron found out last night while he was in dinner at New York. And it's just insane to me that they would absolutely make that move, because Dallas is essentially looking like they didn't want to supermax him for concerns. And we'll talk about that in a minute, but this is just a seismic move. It is, I'd love to say it's a domino that's going to make other stuff start to rev back up, but I don't think that necessarily it is. But boy, it changes the landscape of the NBA, and you wonder how Bron reacts to it. The fact that they've kind of now signaled that they are willing to put their future ahead of his present to some degree.
Well, I'll start here. I mean, LeBron has been a huge admirer of Luka from the very beginning. So I don't think there's going to be an issue there. I mean, with with LeBron, it tends to also be like, if he has an issue with somebody he's playing with, it's kind of like trade the guy, but don't lead it back to me. So I don't know how things were between him and AD. In truth, it seemed like they had a good relationship. He obviously talked AD up quite a bit. I remember being in New Orleans with the Heat when LeBron gushed about AD when AD was in New Orleans. And I remember saying something at that point, oh, he'll probably play with him at some point. And he did. And, with Luka, he gushed about Luka. He'll probably play with him at some point. So, yeah, the Mavericks trade Luka, Kleber, Markieff Morris for Anthony Davis, Max Christie, a 2029 first-round pick. And then, like you mentioned, Utah got involved on the other side of this, which does have some relevance because we could see that happen with the Jimmy Butler trade, where a couple of teams get involved kind of on the back end and are sort of sweetened to take players just to make the money work. And that seems to be what happened here with Utah. But I mean, I think there are some things we can get to with the Heat. But I also don't think that this is, like you say, a domino trade, because I don't think anybody saw this coming. The Fox trade, if that happens, there are teams involved in that you could see involved in a possible Jimmy trade.
Exactly.
Trade, it was not. This is just like, I mean, again, this is going to frustrate Heat fans for this reason, for exactly what it is you said, okay? Which is that the Lakers always find a way to get somebody. Now, it doesn't always work out. But they find ways to get names. And the Heat are always mentioned along with the Lakers as one of these attractive destinations. And yet the Heat have not gotten these names since Jimmy. In 2019, and prior to that, you go back to 2010 when they got those names. But the Lakers, it always seems like, well, they'll never find their way out of this to kind of reconfigure this team, and then they do. Again, I don't know whether it's going to work or not. I just know that if conditioned properly, Luka Doncic is the prize of this trade, and so that's what you have to look at. Now, it seems like Dallas got tired of him being overweight. I mean, that seems, Nico Harrison, the general manager, it's pretty clear he wanted him to get into better shape. That also resonates with Heat fans, because it's not that Jimmy was in bad shape, but there was an obviously not, but there was an availability issue with him. And what's funny is, even with all the suspensions this year, Jimmy still has played more games than Luka has. Jimmy's played 25 games, and Luka, not all of them hard, okay, but he's played 25 games, and Luka's played 22. So I think for the Mavericks, this seemed to be availability, but for them it was as it related to his weight and maybe his knees. Okay. Whereas Jimmy was more of their perception that he was load managing himself, and that they made a decision that they did not want to pay him ultimately what they could have with the 2026 Supermax, which again, not the same amount of money, not the exact same vehicle, but is similar in some ways to what the Heat felt about Jimmy. Okay, even though Luka's a much younger player, and at this stage, even if not in best condition, a better player than Jimmy Butler. I think we have to acknowledge that. Nobody was talking about Jimmy as being a top 5 player in the league. Luka has been an MVP candidate for the past few seasons. So this is a seismic trade, okay, in terms of the NBA. I think, uh, maybe changes LeBron's clock here a little bit, because there were a lot of whispers that next year was going to be LeBron's last year. I'm not so sure about that now. If Luka gets in shape and they can extend the timeline here,
And he
I can see
stays.
LeBron, and I can see LeBron staying there longer. So that's the other thing to
And
consider.
Luka staying. Sorry, just to
And Lucas staying in 26. But again, he can't get this full supermax he would have gotten from Dallas because he's gone to another team now. So I do think that changes the dynamic a little bit. I think obviously this is going to be the story of the season now the rest of the way. So like I said, outside of Miami, nobody's caring about this Jimmy thing over the next few days or beyond, okay? Because
I'm
unless
sure
the
the
Lakers,
Heat are happy about that, probably.
well, they get in the news a little bit. But I also think it to a certain degree justifies their you would take this two ways. I think it justifies like for fans are like, oh, they're making such a big deal about Jimmy's availability. Well, Dallas made such a big deal about a better player's availability that they literally just gave up on him. And you can try to sell me on the AD part of this. But I don't. I think we've seen AD's best years. AD, by the way, was more available last season. That's the funny thing about this too, is that Dallas, because of this availability issue with Luka and the weight and all that, they end up acquiring a player who literally has a nickname, Street Clothes. Okay, so AD
He's
is
been
not the
really
most
good this
available.
year, though. Just to give him
He
the
has.
credit, he's been great this season.
He has, but I think Laker fans' issue with AD is that he's great for like a stretch, and then like he'll disappear in a game and you won't understand why he disappeared in that particular game. Is he out of his prime entirely? No. Okay, but he is older than Luka. He has had a bunch of injuries. Some of them have been freak injuries over the years. Like you said, he did play 75 games last year. That actually would have ranked first on the Heat. So the fact that he has the nickname Street Clothes didn't really apply to him last season. But in that way, it kind of reminds me of Tua, like where Tua played all 17 last year, and then this year he didn't. I kind of feel like with AD, you're always waiting for the next injury. Um, but I don't think you can make any case that from a basketball perspective, as good as AD is and likely a Hall of Famer, that they got better. I don't think you can make that case, and it
They're
just seems
trying
like
to.
they're
Neat.
trying to, and they may do something else, and that's where this might come into it. But I want to ask you just, and we'll get into what Dallas could do and whether Miami can engage Dallas now on Jimmy, because that's something that, or at least as part of a trade on Jimmy, because that's something that's come up today. But I'll just ask you this: does it frustrate you at all as a Heat observer that it does seem like other teams get things done easier?
I mean, I would be lying if I said that there isn't a level of disappointment and frustration when you've now watched, like, we'll go through the names. I'll try not to chronologically do it, but like Dame and Donovan Mitchell, and we can argue about how in and how real any of the different things were, but these are all players that either had direct connections to the Heat or had pretty damn direct connections to players on the Heat. And you just kind of, I mean, let's just be honest about the Mitchell situation. That hurt Heat fans because Donovan was playing with Bam in Miami Pro League and getting
Right.
cheered and the whole deal. So anyway, when you start to get a little PTSD when you see the Lakers, kind of is a different circumstance for me, but it's more of like when the Clevelands of the world made that kind of trade, or when Milwaukee comes out of nowhere and gets Dame. These are just big names that you thought Miami were going to, as they'd done in the past, close the deal on, and you were just hoping that that would be the way that the Jimmy era could end. And I think that the way that the Jimmy era has crashed and burned makes it even hurt more when you see that there's opportunities that just, for whatever reason didn't work out for Miami. And you do see a team like LA, although I really think they're a special circumstance. And I think that there's things at play with the GM in Dallas now being a former Nike employee. I also think that like Nico Mannion came out today and said, and it was I wish I could credit the reporter now, but I'll try to do so later on. But basically, the statement read, "We were expecting him to like make this ugly to some degree when his extension was up, and he would have maybe wanted to go into free agency or maybe just not want to commit, and he says specifically, we wanted to get ahead of that." And that's interesting to me because Luka is like a megastar, top 5 guy in the league, even when he's been out of shape. And so like he was in the finals last year, and it's just unprecedented that
but how does that make, but when you say that, Greg, when you say that, you say they wanted to get ahead of it, and there are Heat fans who say, I'm just trying to play devil's advocate here, that the Heat didn't get out ahead of this Jimmy situation, that it was handled more publicly because they called him out publicly, or Pat did, but then that no move was made after that, when I guess the average person would say, well, Jimmy wasn't going to handle that well. And they were kind of banking on their culture and his desire for a new contract that he would buy in this season. And obviously, it has not happened, right? And I know the Heat will say, well, there was no offer for him out there last summer. What you're hearing is not right about that and all the rest of this. And the Heat fans will say, well, you should have shopped him more aggressively. So I guess I'm just trying to play devil's advocate in this regard, because Dallas, their fans are furious today, okay? And Heat fans, even though Jimmy is not of the level of Luka Doncic, would have been furious if the Heat had gotten out ahead of this last summer. I maintain this. Even after he was injured and couldn't play in the play-in game and they got eliminated and all the rest of that in the first round in 5 games, they would have, even after he had a season in which he wasn't all that available, the Heat fans would have been angry, okay, for sure, all right? But Dallas is taking the risk that their fans are like on fire angry today. Like you've traded the next Dirk. Like they had Dirk all those years. There were times that Dirk could have left. Dirk took less money. I guess Luka was not going to be inclined to do that. But this is similar. They're similar in some ways. And I know Cuban's not running the show there anymore. I don't think this happens if Cuban's running the show.
Hell no.
Right. Okay. I don't think this happens. But you look at San Antonio and Dallas. San Antonio having David Robinson there, right, for the length of his career. Duncan coming in, becoming the next who was there for the length of his career. Ginobili there for the length of his career. I know Tony Parker played a meaningless season in Charlotte, but they were able to keep all those guys together. Like, those players don't get moved. Kawhi only got traded because he basically disappeared on the team during a dispute about his health and his rehabilitation. Okay. And then Pop ended up moving him. But typically, like San Antonio, you don't give, and Dallas is the same. Like, Luka was next. Like, is Dirk, and Luka was having a career that just statistically, okay, he didn't have the championship yet, but took Dirk a while, as we know. Okay. It took him till 11. He had to lose to the Heat in 06. That he had a career that was going to exceed Dirk's in Dallas ultimately. Okay. And they basically punted on that early. Like, it's remarkable to me that this happened. Like, just beyond the scope of, what you got and what you didn't get, and whether you got a top 20. AD is still a top 20 player. You got a top 20 player. You got a 1 pick, okay, a 29 pick. I mean, you look at this, and then you look at like what was just gotten for Gobert a couple of years ago, gotten for Mikal Bridges. Okay, I mean, like, this is, honestly, as good as AD is, like, Luka was the type of player you were like, okay, if you're gonna get this guy prior to him going free agent in 2026, you were gonna give up like 7 first-round picks. Like, you would have to find
it like the biggest haul of all time. Like, that's what you would expect from a Luka.
And that's not what this is. That's not what this is. This is AD, who is, again, still an all-star, still an elite player, but he doesn't. Age-wise and in all other ways, is not Luka in that regard. And I just can see how Heat fans today will react to this. And I'm already starting to see it, which is, I know you say the Lakers are a special circumstance, but it's like, wow, the Lakers just like pull this shit out of their bleeps like all the time. When
I'm sure Miami would say if they called us and Alfred Luka, we would have figured something out too. There's, I think Mark Stein said that and don't quote me on that either. I'm being awful with my aggregating today. That they called one other team about a week or two ago, and that team declined to trade their star for Luka. So then they went ahead with this. And also, Mark Stein is reporting this morning that this conversations about this deal started on January the 7th. So this, just for additional context, Heat fans came to me last night and said, "Do you think the Heat were reached, that they reached out to the Heat about, I guess they're assuming that would be Bam that you would make that trade, or Bam and
I
Jimmy?"
guess, but I was going to ask you that question, so we don't have to spend a lot of time on this. If they had come to you with this exact same deal, I know the contracts are a little different, so I'd have to look at how the numbers work. But like, if they came to this exact same deal and said, "Bam," but did the Heat even have a 29 first? I'll have to check. But Bam, a 29 first. In other words,
They have a
similar
tradable first.
tradable first, or it's similar parameters on these deals. Okay, I mean, the answer to that is yes. Take Bam, right? Like, are you and I are in agreement on that? Like,
yeah,
yes,
I mean, as
take
much
Bam.
as it pains my soul to even think about the idea of trading Bam, it is one of the few trades that I think the Heat could look Bam in the eyes and say it's Luka, and he would understand. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I think we all would be able to understand that. So it's particularly, and I know Bam has had a resurgent week, but especially after, this has been a choppy season, as we know. And I think if you get a chance to get Luka, you go get Luka. Who did they ask for? I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Would they have asked for SGA from OKC,
or
Would
Giannis?
they, or Giannis or Jokic? I mean, I those are the only. I mean, again, we're talking about. This is just a different level here. I mean, Luka has the potential, if he ever got in shape, which was part of the issue, or a big part of the issue with Dallas. He's a generational player. Like, this is not like a mere all-star. This is a generational. I mean, that team that went to the finals last year, when they weren't that great in the regular season. They added Lively and PJ. They drafted Lively, but they added PJ Washington and Gafford, and they ended up getting the finals. I mean, that was not a finals team that Luka took to the finals. Okay, I mean, you're talking about a generational player who is now going to LA, and it just seems like with the Lakers, it's always, one guy is gone and they find another to kind of front the franchise. And again, I understand that why Heat fans, and I know circumstances are different. The contracts play into it, picks play into it, where you are as a franchise at that particular time plays into it, but just in general, I understand why Heat fans are like, and we've been dilly-dallying around with this thing on Jimmy for 2 months.
Yeah.
And they literally it seems like they got a Luka deal done I know it's since January 7th or whatever, but it feels like a heartbeat that they just got this thing going, and they got it going without anybody finding out about it. Like,
That's the key.
Right? Right? This is also in the middle of the night. This happens where everybody thought it wasn't a real trade. All right, let's talk about the Heat, the real life Heat consequences here, and whether or not they can involve either of these teams right now in a possible Jimmy trade. Before we do, I want to tell you about a great new sponsor here. And now it's time for Who's on the Move, sponsored by our friends over at Cousins USA Moving and Storage, family owned and operated since 1996. They can service both residential and commercial moves, whether you're going across town, across the state, across country, and even across the globe. They have a 15,000 square foot private warehouse in Lauderhill, Broward County. The number one priority for Cousins Moving is transparency and being honest with their customers. They have a very low turnover, with most of their movers working for them for over 10 years. So find them online at Cousins Moving on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, or visit the website at www.cousinsusa.com/5RSN. They've got an exclusive offer through 5RSN. You get 5 free wardrobe boxes with your next move, so there's no need to pack your clothes away in suitcases. Just mention 5 reasons. And now, who's on the move? All right, well, as of this morning, we appreciate our new sponsor there. Jimmy Butler is not yet on the move.
Luka's on the move.
Luka is on the move. I want to read this quote, and this is why we're saying if Cuban was still majority control in Dallas, this doesn't happen. His quote was, this was a couple years ago, "If I had to choose between my wife and keeping Luka on the Mavs, catch me at my lawyer's office prepping for a divorce." So, yeah, I mean, Cuban was not going to move him. And I again, this is why I'm just in shock that this actually happened. But let's touch on two elements of this related to the Heat here before we go. Number one is we've talked a lot about 2026. The Heat wanted to stay lean for 2026. Obviously the Heat have an advocate for Luka in their not in their front office, but in their midst, where they could easily bring Goran Dragic into the front office. It's something that he's been
Oh,
wanting
yeah.
to do anyway. And so we've always talked about that kind of connection that they potentially have. Um, to me, I think this makes Luka less likely to be available in 26 because he's going to be built around by the prestige franchise in the entire sport. They're going to market Luka in ways that he never could have gotten marketed in Dallas. I just think unless they completely screw up the build around him, I mean, even if LeBron exits in a year, I mean, I guess they've got they have Reeves, they got Connect. I mean, they'll add other pieces to it, but essentially, they're starting in a place where it's going to be an attractive destination. I know you get the state tax in California, you don't have it in Texas, but I find it less likely that he leaves, even though he can't get the same dollar amount he got
That's
from Dallas. You think there's a chance?
I actually disagree with you. I think that this maybe the chances aren't high either way, but this was the
Mm.
only way that I thought, because everyone's bringing up 2026. And when I talk about it specifically, I think people are alluding to the fact that I think that the Heat are going to go free agent hunting. And I don't necessarily think that that's precisely how you would approach a 2026 offseason. Obviously, you want to get meetings with guys if they're taking them, etc. But Luka turning down the Supermax in Dallas was not going to happen. And it was more he would accept that and then make it ugly there. And the Heat were going to get outbid in that scenario, no matter what, if that's how that went. So the fact that he can't get the Supermax in LA, there is the chance that it flames out in Los Angeles and he doesn't like it there and the team's not good. And then he tests the waters. Now, there's been a lot of talk of the fact that they can offer him. Brian Windhorst has been all over this idea that Luka is going to take only a 3-year extension so that when his next free agent period comes up, he will have 10 years of service, which just elevates the amount he can make and, the percentage of the cap, etc. So, if he does that, then you're right. Like this is Luka's off the table, but there is still the chance that Luka could not like the situation in LA because frankly, he didn't choose to go there. He was traded there. So we don't know yet how much he loves the LA, but you're right that guys don't typically leave LA. That's the thing. So, but there's a chance because he's now not going to get the Supermax that no outside team can compete with financially. There's a little bit more of a level playing field if you have the cap space, but it's still a shot in the dark. It's kind of hope, and hope is not a strategy, as they say.
No, it's not. It's not. But I understand what you're saying there. I think the only big name guy who's wanted to leave LA was Dwight. And I feel that's again because that thing just flamed out. That was the thing. That was the team with him and Nash, right? And that
Yeah.
didn't work out very well. But yeah, usually guys don't want to leave that situation in Los Angeles, and I understand why. I mean, there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. But I get what you're saying about the money. I feel like this was always a pipe dream in terms of the Luka part of it, which is why when we framed it as the 2026 class, we're like, there's a lot of players that could be available. There's some are going to get extended before that. They're going to get taken out of the market. But even with that, there's a lot of pieces that could be, acquired, like quality rotation players that are going to be available at that time. There's just a glut of players whose contracts come open at that time. And like you said, you also could take players in trades. There's lots of other ways to do this other than just the direct cap space. So that's why targeting 26, and also if you look at the youth of this Heat build now, with Tyler being 25 and Ware and Jovic, if they're still here, being 20 and 21, like the extra year here, like targeting 26 is the year that you kind of really build. Again, does make sense from a timeline perspective. Let's get into the Jimmy part of this because Dallas was mentioned initially as the original Shams report, which his camp has denied came from them. And they say that Dallas was not even one of the teams that was realistic, that the only one of the teams Shams mentioned. He mentioned Dallas, Houston, and Golden State originally. And the only one that everybody agreed upon was a serious destination was Golden State. Okay, Houston, had made it pretty clear they weren't going to make a trade for Jimmy. And Dallas, at the time, again, you have a team with Luka, but at the time that wasn't really taken particularly seriously. And again, his camp has said that didn't come from them. Okay, so Dallas, even though again Jimmy's obviously from Texas, he's not from Dallas, he's from the Houston area, but that was out there. Do you see any way that Dallas gets in on a trade now for Jimmy? I mean, we know he has a relationship with Kyrie, or just maybe they have some parts now that don't fit as well with what they're putting together, I guess more around AD and Kyrie. And like, could you get a PJ Washington? Could you get I mean, are there other players in the Dallas mix? I mean, Grimes is a player that might that's our friend Evan Cohen texted me this morning. He's like, he would fit pretty nicely next to Tyler. Like, do you see anything changing the dynamic where maybe Dallas gets involved in a deal for Jimmy, even if not for him, then maybe as part of the deal?
For roster construction purposes, it makes a ton of sense to bring in Jimmy Butler. Like, I think, frankly, they kind of need like the alpha guy. And I know Alex will roll his eyes at that with AD and Kyrie. I feel like Jimmy's actually a great fit next to them. But the issue for me is that when you look at the balance of their contracts, like Klay Thompson, PJ Washington, Daniel Gafford, and I don't know who and all they'd move. Quentin Grimes, you mentioned. Najee Marshall is there as well, who's a young player or relatively young, 27, and on a small salary. The issue is they would have to aggregate so many salaries that I don't know that the Heat have the roster spots to take back those players. Now, obviously, there's ways where if you get into 3 or 4 team deals that maybe where there's roster spots or more space and stuff like that, you can have different guys going elsewhere. But they're hard capped at the first apron, Dallas is. And so it'll just be an interesting mix. I don't know that they are going to want to trade like, I'm making this up. Like, and these dollars don't even match Jimmy. So like, there's still math that would need to math, but are they really going to trade Klay, PJ Washington, and Daniel Gafford for him? I don't know that they're looking to necessarily make that consolidation like trade. And then even when you think about the Lakers, like, could the Lakers figure something out? I don't think that they're willing to put Austin Reeves in any kind of deal if he didn't move in this deal for Luka. So as much as I'd love to add Dallas to the mix, for some reason, I just get the sense that the way their contracts lay out, it's going to be difficult for them to get enough salary into a trade to ultimately get back Jimmy Butler.
No, I think that makes sense. I think it's more likely they get involved as a peripheral team here because it does feel like they need to do some roster balancing.
Correct.
Um,
As LA does. They have
as
no
LA
bigs.
does. But I can't even make sense of what LA is going to do now. Like, to me, it's you get Luka and you figure it out.
They won 8
there's
of
a
10,
lot
Ethan, and they just traded him. And Luka, they don't know when he's going to play. Sorry to interrupt you.
Right.
It's so
Yeah.
weird. It is the weirdest deal.
Well, it's a weird deal because of who's still there, but it's a deal you make every time.
Oh, for sure. It's not weird.
Right, like no, it's not weird. Like, you just get Luka and you figure it out, whatever it is he plays, and ultimately, you give LeBron, I guess, this last ride into the sunset with ideally a motivated, lighter Luka. Okay, that would be the plan here. But you're right. As far as a team that the Lakers had kind of cleared themselves of the play-in this year, like they have gotten themselves out of that mess, and now they've basically given up AD now. So I mean, it's as if AD got hurt. Okay,
yeah,
and you
they
can't
don't know when Luka will play
because they don't know when Luka's come back, right? And you can't replace AD with Maxi Kleber. So like essentially, they're going to have trouble up front, and LeBron's going to be asked to do some different things.
Sorry
now.
to interrupt you.
I don't. I mean, is LeBron what position is LeBron going to play with this? Well, the other thing that's going to be really interesting when the two of them play together is who's on the ball, because this would be LeBron relinquishing the ball in a way that he never has before. Like, you talk about him coming to Miami and him and Dwayne occupying the same spots. Ultimately, the Heat made the decision for Dwayne to relinquish the ball. It took that first year of them working through it and Dwayne backing off. But eventually it became more cutting from Dwayne. And again, LeBron had the ball in his hands at the top the majority of the time, even as much as they wanted to put him in the post. And that was Spo's idea long term for him and to play the 4. That ultimately they did it. Now, with him and Kyrie, was while he's playing with a true point guard now, he's not playing with Rio. He's playing with Kyrie. He's going to be off the ball all the time. And when it mattered, Kyrie was spotting up, okay? And then, obviously he would be involved as the primary guy on the secondary actions. But, it was LeBron, okay, with the ball in his hands. In LA, it's always been LeBron. They've never really – they tried the Westbrook thing, and it was a total disaster. And LeBron couldn't wait to get him out of there. Anybody else they've had who's tried to take the ball from him, whether it's D'Angelo Russell, et cetera, has not worked. And so – but now this is – Luka is the ultimate – on the ball player. He is, he doesn't look like one, but he is a point guard.
Yeah. He's the entire engine, and so is LeBron. And that's what's crazy. 2 engines in one car.
Right. Exactly. It's going to be fascinating. I actually, I make fun of the whole, all the league focuses on is the Lakers and a little bit of Warriors and Celtics. And that's, I'm talking about ESPN. That's all they care about. In this particular case, I'm actually interested in it. Because this is an experiment with LeBron that can he actually take a step back and let this other guy dominate the action like that? Is LeBron going to be a spot up shooter? I think it's fascinating whenever it is that he comes back. But I'll just say this, we've talked about the Jimmy thing now for 2 months, and it just doesn't feel that important right now. Anyway, I know it does to Heat fans, but it's just this morning, it's kind of like, hey, you can have your little top 25 player conversations over there. We're talking about somebody generational here. I understand how
it's going to heat back up soon.
Well, you would think, at least until the Fox trade. All right, Greg, appreciate it. I might pod again later tonight. Who knows? But that's the trade. Luka to the Lakers and AD to Dallas. And again, we'll continue to monitor the Jimmy Butler situation as we go forward. The Heat, of course, are game over 500 now, and still have 3 games left on this trip. Back to back on Tuesday and Wednesday. So what is that one? Is that Philadelphia, Chicago? No, that's Chicago, Philadelphia, that order. Brooklyn later in the week before they're back home against Boston. So we'll see if by Friday Jimmy Butler is still a member of the Miami Heat. Thanks to our sponsors, cousinsusa.com and Water Cleanup of Florida, WCUFL.com. Have a good one.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. After all, someone needs to listen to my dad.